Hey class, how are you? I'm back. It's been, I guess, about 2 weeks since I last recorded, and I really do appreciate the patience you've offered me during this comp season. It's very 1 month from today, I have my final exams for my PhD, and so that's important for me to study for that because I've got about 10 more books to go, mostly in sound studies and some basic media theory. But I had a practice test yesterday, and I did about what they said, about 75-80%. So that's pretty good for 1 month out, so still have another month to study. But I want to make sure that we stay on track with the class because now we have about 2 modules left. So today's lecture is in response to Module 3, which I would consider like the hardest part of this class, because once you get over that hump, I know that you're understanding the material of this course. And so for those of you who have already handed in the lesson from the memes and politics, or the how memes affect how we speak lesson, I've already recognized that you understand what I'm talking about when I speak about memes and how we are a political being. And so I want to go over a little bit about that today, and then I want, of course, there's going to be a quiz in relation to this lecture, as there always is, but I want to go over that today, but I also want to go into what are the other assignments that you'll be covering in the next module, Module 4, and then Module 5, which I'm not going to talk about too much at this point. But I want to make sure that we go over these so you can understand how we're going to progress through the next levels of the course. So first, how memes affect how we speak lesson or paper is very important. And for those, like I said, for those of you who have already done that, you did a very good job. You understand what I'm talking about. Because what I'm really talking about when it comes down to that is that we are now inseparable from how the internet affects our lives. I think people still think the internet is a tool for communication, or that we kind of can opt out of that. And that's not really something that is possible at this point. And it's because and I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but it comes down to the fact that at some point in our history, the internet has become a utility. And I would say that somewhere around the time of 2005, maybe through 2005 to 2010, and it became a utility in the way that electricity is a utility. In other words, when electricity was first implemented, there were people that could opt out or opt in or have their own. But at a certain point, there was no way of getting out of that structure. That structure was part and parcel of how we existed. In doing so, though, we never realized that those utilities are political actions, because participating in some sort of utility is a choice that we have to make as consumers. And so when the internet became a utility, it became very important to understand that those who didn't have the internet or don't use the internet became like an outsider type of force, where that is something different than what we expected. Because while people still may think the internet is a secondary device or a communication technology, just like having a mobile phone, the internet is part of how we are. It's how we are as people. And so if you can understand that, that means that minute changes in that type of communication environment become amplified through the way that people take action to it. And so what I wanted you to see in that previous thing is that while we have mimetic life, which means how culture shifts, you participate in it. And whether that's a small cultural shift or a large one, people react to those. And so one of my big things that we're going to talk about, or is a point of this class that I want you to understand, is how languages are codified in that way. What I mean by codified is that when a meme occurs, other people have to agree that meme exists. And if they agree that it exists, then other people then know that it's there. And then that means that other pieces of culture can then react to that type of culture. And in doing so, culture shifts. And so the next lesson, reading the internet, is something that not many of you have gotten to. But I want you to look at that in the terms of what cultural shifts are codified. And so I gave 2 examples that you may absolutely use, but if you use them, you have to understand that there's a lot of writing on it. So you should go with something a little less covered, so you could have some more freedom and creativity with it. But what I'm looking for is like a hashtag campaign or a meme campaign that occurred that you could write about. And what I mean by reading the internet is that we read the internet like we read newspapers, or we read the internet like we read books, or the way that we read text like video and films. And so I gave an example of the hashtag #MeToo or the hashtag ASL challenge as examples, because what those were is, when you see those types of examples, when you see memes or campaigns appear, it is somewhat of a reflection of what's going on in our environment. So when you see something like the planking, like hashtag planking, the things are going pretty well at that time when you could have the time to have fun and do some sort of thing that's out of the norm. That said, hashtag planking ended up having a tragedy and going away when a woman was planking on a balcony and rolled off into her death. And so planking, a lot of these trends become very wild and become very usable, but some of them have no ends, and you may analyze any of these. But you have to understand that when you read a hashtag trend or read something that is along the lines of something that's happening very rapidly, it's a reflection of our environment. It's a reflection of what's going on in the world around us. And so when you see like the hashtag Me Too trend, it's because of the Weinstein allegations. But you could also see that trend wasn't new. That's about 10 years old. But knowing that it's something that appears, maybe it's even 20 years old. But in seeing that those trends appear, it means that that's the language of the internet that we used. And so to reference Benedict Anderson in Imagined Communities, you have to understand that Benedict Anderson's approach was that print, the idea that somebody printed something, print creates the idea of nationalism, or the idea of how you become a sovereign being. And that is because print is the codification of a language. Print is when you take a language, the way we speak to one another, and you codify it, you make it formalized. And in creating that grammar, which becomes the formal aspect of it, now you exclude those who are misusing that language. And so exclusion and inclusion is part of nationalism. And so when you understand that pride comes from the idea of how things are codified, you could understand that the internet is a codification factory. It creates and presents new and original material, and then the users codify that. And once it's codified, you have reaction to those things. And so that's really what I want you to analyze. But I did embed that within a Coney 2012 breakdown. And the reason I did that is because if you take Coney 2012, which you read and analyzed, but you could re-break it down into its constitutive elements that tell you how it becomes codified in a language reified, which means it's done again and again and again. And that was the point of that, is that you've seen this material before, which once you read it, you'll understand. And of course, the quiz will have some questions about that as well. But here's what's important. I want to make sure that we move on to the next module, Module 4 and then Module 5, but Module 4 is going to be in 2 parts. And for the next minute or two, I want to talk about part 1, which is new media literacy or digital media literacies. And in this case, I really want to talk to you about why we use technological aspects of the internet. The second half is about commodification and marketing. So we'll get to that at another point. That's next time. But for DML, for digital media literacy, you have to remember that digital media literacy means reading and writing. And I've said this many times. You don't just use the internet, you read and write on the internet. But in the case of this module, I want you to actually write as the way the internet speaks. And so in that terms, you're going to be learning a little bit, basics of HTML, no CSS in this case. I would recommend you go on and learn more CSS. But HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, is the way in which the internet speaks through the browser. It has a code language, and that code language allows human-computer interaction, known as HCI, or human-machine interaction, through a graphical user interface, known as a GUI. And what that means is that we can interact with the screen, and when we interact with the screen, the machine does all sorts of processes at any given point. And those processes are pretty interesting because we don't see them, but you have to understand the machine interacts with that all the time. Why I want you to learn HTML is it's easy. It's an easily accessible language that at this point I would say even like grade schoolers are learning, and I highly recommend that you do know a little bit of HTML. But what it is what's called a visual language. It's a language that when you type out the language, it appears as a visual on a screen. And that's because HTML as a markup language is similar to using, when we hear the term markup language, it's like making things italics, emphasized, or bold for making it bolder. You know what I mean? And so the browser is a reader, sort of like Kindle reads Kindle files and Acrobat reads PDFs and Word reads DOC. The browser reads HTML. And that's its language in order to see how things appear on screen. By you learning the basics, you become a little bit better at discerning parts of the way that the internet work. You can tell when things are working properly or things aren't working properly. And you could start using the language, what we're saying, and vernacular of digital media. Because I think that's very important to how you communicate with others who use digital media as well. Additionally, the next part of this is I want you to learn a little bit from the Khan Academy. The Khan Academy is a disruptor in education, and I want you to go to that site, and I want you to pick a lesson about anything you want, just something that's kind of maybe not in your field. So if you're an educator or you're in Cap 21, maybe you should think about trying a lesson on physics or something. Actually, Cap 21 is probably have to know physics because they move a lot. But you should learn about something that is different than what you're used to. And I want you to take at least one lesson. Just watch one of the videos. The site is filled with hundreds, potentially thousands of YouTube videos that give you tutorials. Obviously pick an intro level. But I want you to do that and write a reflection on what you learned and why you learned that way. And do you like learning through the Khan Academy? And is that something that you would be interested in? And finally, the last assignment of the first part of this module is a vlog, which, as you know, I like making sure that you know how to do. Now, in this case, this vlog is going to be shared with your classmates. Okay, so you have to vlog in knowing that the audience is going to be seeing what you've done. So you have to record a vlog with this easy prompt. If I could change one thing about education, I would. And you could say whatever you want. And I'm being very serious here. These vlogs will not leave the discussion board. That's why you should make them, if you say something a little controversial, you should make it unlisted and post it in the discussion board. But I really want you guys to comment on each other's and agree or disagree. I didn't set up the peer review system, but I still want you to interact with your classmates on this one. But post a vlog between 1 and 2 minutes long with your answer about what you would change about education. And then this way we get to see what other people think. Now you may be very candid, and the only rules I tell you is that you can't say professors' names or classes specifically because it's just not quite appropriate. But I do want you to pick out something that maybe you don't like about the way that the education system works. And if you could change it, what would you do, and how would that be in your world? And like I said, be creative. This is graded on creativity. So thank you again for understanding me while I go through my educational hell as I read tons and tons of books and learn all the keywords and themes behind a lot of the different theory that is pretty useless after the test. But thank you so much for understanding and giving me the time to do that. In about a week, I will post up the next lecture, which will be on part 2 of Module 4. And this way we get closer to the end, which is future new media literacies. And then we get to the robots and watching the movie Her. So we will get there. But thanks again, and until next time, I'll see you soon.